Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon so that you never miss any video lesson from Rao's IAS Study Circle.
Dear students, Rao's IAS Prelims Test Series 2021 is a complete testing and revision course for the upcoming prelims examination. The program will help you prepare for UPSC prelims through a step-up approach. It is a meticulously designed study plan to organize your preparation and keep you on track towards covering the prelims GS and CSAT syllabus extensively from NCERT to the advanced level. The goal of our Prelims Test Series 2021 program is to exhaustively cover all standard sources of study material, including NCERT, with a study plan to test you at par with UPSC level of questions, thereby improving your chances of clearing the prelims examination. To give multiple revision of the entire syllabus from the perspective of civil service prelims pattern, the test series program will also give you the final revision of all topics and themes before the examination through QIP videos and prelims compass notes. The QIP videos or Quality Improvement Program videos are for speedy revision of all important topics for the upcoming prelims examination. QIP videos are kind of crash course for the prelims examination. And prelims compass are 8 subject-wise prelims compilation of all static and current affair topics important for the upcoming prelims. Rao's IAS Prelims Test Series 2021 will include topics test, testing the concept of candidate. It will include thematic test on both the concept and the current affair of that particular theme. It will also include current affair tests covering the monthly current affairs. And there will be full-length test before the final exam to simulate you for the D-Day. There is a link in the description of this video. You can click on the link for registration and to also check out the demo QIP videos.
Now regarding the DNS weekly mains answer writing, the question for today is, Khilafat and non-cooperation movements certainly unleashed a surge of popular action that was altogether unprecedented in colonial India. Substantiate. And you have to answer this question in 150 words and it carries 10 marks. Now to have a clear understanding of this topic, you can go through the DNS dated 8th January 2021 for the discussion on Khilafat and non-cooperation. Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading from a UPSC Civil Services examination perspective. Now today we shall discuss the important news which has appeared in the New Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 11th February 2021. The news to be discussed has been displayed on your screen and timestamping for the same has been provided in the description box below. So on this note, let's start our today's discussion from our UPSC Civil Services examination point of view. Now let's take up this particular news appearing on page number 10. Now it says that India to better its disaster management as per the Prime Minister. Now this news highlights that the Prime Minister of India inaugurated the World Sustainable Development Summit of 2021, which is organized by TERI, that is the Energy Resources Institute. Now the news highlights that the Prime Minister said that we must enhance our disaster management capabilities. And the way to do this is to improve our human resources as well as technology. Now, apart from the aspect of disaster management, Prime Minister also highlighted important aspects with respect to achieving a greener planet. And the Prime Minister said that to achieve a greener planet, there is a need for the world to adopt greener technologies. And in the process of the speech, he also mentioned about a very important term referred as climate justice. So in this regard, let's go through the key highlights of the speech of Prime Minister, which he mentioned at the inaugural event of World Sustainable Development Summit. Now, the World Sustainable Development Summit addresses the key issue of fight against climate change. So in this backdrop, let us go through the key highlights of the speech of Prime Minister of India. So on a larger perspective, the Prime Minister highlighted the need and importance to achieve greener planet by adopting greener technologies. And it is here where the Prime Minister said that both the health of the people and the planet are interlinked. So, we not only need to take care of the health of the planet, but also at the same time, we need to take care of the health of the people, especially such people who are deprived of basic amenities, such as those of health and education. So, in this regard, the Prime Minister said that there is a need to think innovative ways to save health of the planet. And it is here where he referred to two important aspects. He said that there is a need to invest in today's youngsters and also work towards sustainable development. So these are the two aspects which the Prime Minister highlighted at this particular speech. Now, the Prime Minister, as suggested earlier, mentioned that road to fight climate change is through climate justice. Now, this term becomes important from your examination point of view, as question in your pre as well as means can be framed around the central idea or the central theme of achieving climate justice by achieving a greener planet through adopting greener technology. So keep these underlying currents in mind while going through the newspapers, as these underlying themes are at times picked by UPSC to frame questions. According to the Prime Minister, there is a need for climate justice because natural disasters impacts the poor and the vulnerable section the most, as we have seen in the recent flood caused due to breaking of glaciers in the Himalayas. Further, the Prime Minister said that the aspect of climate justice can be achieved through a vision of trusteeship. Now, here trusteeship means welfare of the poor nation and poor people, which must be the collective responsibility of rich nations. So, again, the Prime Minister is talking about a welfare approach by adopting greener technology. And it is here where the Prime Minister urged the developed nations to bear the responsibility for developing and poor countries. Now, regarding climate justice, the Prime Minister further said that growth must come with greater compassion to the poor. So, again, he is urging the developed countries not only to go for profit but also to go for sustainable development, keeping the aspect of climate change in mind. Another aspect mentioned by the Prime Minister regarding climate justice is to give developing countries enough space for their growth. Now, this is because in their initial phases of development, these countries are mostly dependent on fossil based fuel. And we know that fossil based fuels such as coal cause more environmental pollution. So, it is here where the Prime Minister highlights about giving developing countries enough space to grow. And finally, regarding climate justice, the Prime Minister said that when every one of us understands our individual and collective duties, then climate justice will be achieved. So, if a question is asked on climate justice, then you can also mention about CBDRRC, which means common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. So, please keep these important points in mind while going through any other article with respect to climate justice. Now, moving further with respect to Prime Minister's speech, he said that India is also committed to reduce emissions intensity of GDP by 33 to 35% from 2005 levels. Now, this term, reducing emissions intensity, simply means reducing the emission rate of pollutant vis-a-vis or with respect to intensity of economic activity. So it simply reflects that with increase in intensity of economic activity, there must be a decrease in emission rate of pollutants. So this is what the Prime Minister highlights when he says that India is committed to reduce emissions intensity of GDP by 33 to 35% from 2005 levels. Further, the Prime Minister also highlights that a drop of 24% in the emission intensity has already been achieved by India. Further, India is also in the process to achieve 40% cumulative electric power installed capacity from non fossil fuel based resources, namely nuclear and hydro projects. Now, another important aspect highlighted by Prime Minister is with respect to land degradation neutrality. Here he said that India is committed to land degradation neutrality. Now, this aspect has been mentioned in the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. Now, land degradation neutrality basically refers to shift in land management policies and practices as to counterbalance expected loss of productive land vis-a-vis development with respect to recovery of degraded lands. So suppose because of economic activity or expansion of economic activity, these much area of productive land was utilized. So we see that a part of the productive land has been utilized for developmental process. So this part must be compensated or counterbalanced by recovery of degraded lands. So suppose these lands are degraded lands and nothing productive takes place here. So it is the onus of the government to develop these degraded lands so as to make them productive. So this is how the aspect of land degradation neutrality works. So, land degradation neutrality simply refers to shift in land management policies and practices with respect to counterbalancing expected loss of productive land, that is this part, vis-a-vis or with respect to recovery of degraded areas, that is this part. Further, it also involves measures to conserve, sustainably manage, and restore land. That is proper land use planning by the government. So, this is with respect to land degradation neutrality. Further, the Prime Minister highlighted various schemes of the Government of India in order to achieve greener planet. The Prime Minister said that India is on track to set up 450 gigawatts of renewable energy generating capacity by the year 2030. He further said that India is also increasing use of ethanol. Now, ethanol is also used as a solvent in the synthesis of other organic chemicals and also used as an additive to automobile fuel. Now, ethanol is a natural byproduct of plant fermentation. It can be also produced through hydration of ethylene and it dissolves in water. So, these are the important points which you must remember about ethanol. And it is also used in various products like household products, beauty products, etc. The Prime Minister also highlighted a very important aspect. He said that sustainable development is incomplete without equitable access. Now, this statement given by the Prime Minister of India can become a proper question for your mains examination and can be asked in GS paper 3. So what you can do is to practice such type of question which becomes important from our examination perspective, especially with respect to environment. So, the statement of Prime Minister says that sustainable development is incomplete without equitable access. So, this statement or this question comprises of three important aspects. One is sustainable development. The second aspect is the linkage of sustainable development with that of equitable access. And without equitable access, sustainable development is incomplete. So, this becomes the third part. Now, here the Prime Minister highlights about steps taken by the government for rural electrification, Ujala scheme and Ujwala scheme. Now, Ujala scheme refers to providing LED bulbs, and Ujwala scheme refers to providing clean cooking fuel, especially LPG connections, to more than 80 million households living below poverty line. Further, the Prime Minister said that India is also working to increase its share of natural gas in India's energy basket from 6 to 15%. Further, with respect to domestic gas infrastructure, the Prime Minister highlighted that work is in progress to improve city gas distribution network. And regarding solar capacity or solar energy, Prime Minister highlighted about the Prime Minister Kusum scheme, where he said that over 30 gigawatts of solar capacity will be developed in the agriculture sector. So all these developments in the field of renewable energy becomes important from our examination perspective, especially with respect to important government schemes such as the Ujala scheme with respect to LED bulbs, Ujwala Yojana with respect to distribution of LPG connections, and Prime Minister Kusum scheme with respect to increasing solar capacity in agriculture sector. Now, further, the Prime Minister mentioned about sustainable development. He said that sustainable development will be achieved by collective efforts with respect to togetherness and innovation. Now, regarding togetherness, he mentioned about the International Solar Alliance, which was initiated by India, and keeping our minds open to best practices of the world. Now, regarding innovation, the Prime Minister mentioned about encouraging startups in the field of renewable energy and also environment friendly technology. As the Government of India in the latest budget of 2021-22 has extended tax holidays for startups by March 2022. Further, the Government of India has also provided for certain capital gain exemption so as to encourage funding in startups. So the Prime Minister expects that similar move must be taken by different countries in order to encourage investment in startups in the field of renewable and environment friendly technology. Now, lastly, the Prime Minister also mentioned about disaster management. He said that there is a need to enhance disaster management capabilities in India. And here, the requirement is to focus on two aspects: human resources development and technology. And the Prime Minister said that India, being a part of Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, is working to achieve both these aspects. So here you must know about the CDRI, or the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. Now this is a multi-stakeholder global partnership, and it involves national governments, United Nations agencies and programs, multilateral development banks and financing mechanisms, private sector and knowledge institutions. And the whole purpose is to promote the resilience of new and existing infrastructure systems to climate and disaster risk in support of sustainable development. So, overall, the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure promotes rapid development of resilient infrastructure to respond to sustainable development goals, which is imperative of expanding universal access to basic services, enabling prosperity and decent work. And the following can be said to be the top priorities or top strategic priorities of CRDI. These includes: first, technical and capacity building; second, research and knowledge management; and third, advocacy and partnership. Now, regarding technical support and capacity building, it says that this includes disaster response and recovery support, innovation, institutional and community capacity building assistance, and standards and certification. Regarding research and knowledge management, it says that this aspect includes collaborative research in the field of disaster resilience, global flagship reports, and a global database of infrastructure and sector resilience. And regarding advocacy and partnership, this includes global events and initiatives, marketplace of knowledge financing and implementation agencies, and dissemination of knowledge products. So these three can be said to be the strategic priorities of CRDI. Now, regarding the members of Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, as you can see, the members include number of countries including Afghanistan, Argentina, Chile, France, India, Japan, Italy, Germany, Fiji, Bhutan, Australia, Jamaica, Maldives, Mongolia, Peru, Turkey, United States of America, UK, Sri Lanka, Nepal, and Mauritius. Now, the multilateral organizations include Asian Development Bank, World Bank Group, the United Nations Development Programme, United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, and in the private sector organization is ARISE, that is Private Sector Alliance for Disaster Resilient Societies, and these are the members of Coalition for Disaster Resilience Infrastructure. Now, in this particular news, number of topics becomes important and can be asked in your prelims and mains examination. For example, the aspect of greener planet or how to achieve greener planet, the aspect of climate justice, the aspect of sustainable development, the aspect to reduce emission intensity of GDP, about land degradation neutrality, the approach of equitable access with respect to sustainable development, about sustainable development and how it can be achieved through togetherness and innovation, and regarding disaster management and with respect to Coalition for Disaster Resilience Infrastructure. So these important topics can be asked both in your prelims and in your mains examination. In the prelims, this topic gets covered under general issues on environmental ecology and climate change, and in your mains gets covered under GS paper 3, especially with respect to conservation, environmental pollution and degradation, and environmental impact assessment, and disaster management. So in this news, I have sort of summarized the speech of Prime Minister of India, which he gave at the inaugural event of World Sustainable Development Summit. And this speech is also available on the website of Ministry of External Affairs. So with this, let's move to the next article. The next news to be discussed appears on page number 9. It says, Rajya Sabha passes Ports Bill despite opposition. Now the Major Port Authorities Bill 2020 aims for the two aspects. Number one, for expansion of port infrastructure, and second, to facilitate trade and commerce. And with regards to these two aspects, the aim of the bill is to decentralize decision making process, infuse professionalism in governance in major ports, and enhance efficiency in operations at major ports. So the bill states that the bill aims to provide for regulation, operation and planning of major ports in India. So these three words becomes important here. First is regulation, second is operation, and third is planning. with respect to the major ports in India and also to vest the administration, control, and management of such ports. So another three words which becomes important is with respect to administration, control, and management. And the administration, control, and management of such ports is upon the boards of major port authorities. So, the administration, control, and management of these ports is upon the boards of major port authorities. So, keeping these aspects in mind, let us go through the salient features of the Major Port Authorities Bill 2020. So, this bill is more compact as compared to the earlier legislation, namely the Major Ports Trust Act of 1963. And the bill is aimed at reorienting the governance model in central ports to landlord port model, which is in line with the successful global practice. So, here you need to know about the landlord port model. Now, when we hear the term landlord, another term which comes into mind is the term rent. So, keeping this aspect of transactional nature of a landlord and the tenant with respect to rent, let's understand this landlord port model. Now, under this model, every port will have a port authority, and that port authority will act as a landlord. So, basically, the government acts as a landlord since they own the port. And the private companies who carry out port operations like cargo handling activities or other operations will pay a sort of a rent for carrying out these activities to the landlord. So, under the landlord port model, Port Authority maintains ownership, whereas infrastructure is leased to private firms, and private firms maintain their own superstructure and install their own equipments to handle cargo and other facilities. And in return, the landlord port, that is the government, or in this case, the Board of Major Port Authorities, gets a share of revenue from the private firms. So, this is how the landlord port model functions. Now, moving further to the other salient features of the Major Port Authorities Bill 2020, it says that the new bill has proposed a simplified composition of the Board of Ports Authority, and this will comprise of 11 to 13 members as compared to the earlier 17 to 19 members. Now, these members will represent various interests with the governments and also with respect to port authorities. Now, the purpose of this compact board is to have professional independent members. So, this aspect becomes important that this compact board will have professional and independent members in order to strengthen decision making and strategic planning. So again, these two aspects becomes important here. That is, decision making process and strategic planning has been emphasized with respect to a compact board. Now, it further mentions about the role of tariff authority for major ports, which was in the earlier legislation of 1963. So it says this aspect has been redefined. And now the Board of Ports Authority has been delegated the power to fix the scale of rates for other port services and assets including land. So this becomes a major responsibility which has been given to the Board of Port Authority. It further says that a provision in the bill has also been made for inclusion of representatives of state government in which major port is situated, Ministry of Railways, Ministry of Defence, Customs Department of Revenue as members in the board, government nominee member, and member representing the employees of major port authority. So regarding the board of port authority, as we can see that it includes representatives from diverse section of the government and also from port authority. Further, the bill also provides for an adjudicatory board. And the purpose of this adjudicatory board is to look into disputes between ports and public private partnership concessionaires, to review stressed PPP projects, and also to suggest measures to review stressed PPP projects, and also suggesting measures to review such projects and to look into complaints regarding services rendered by ports and private operators operating within the port's jurisdiction. So these can be said to be the powers and functions of adjudicatory board. Now regarding the boards of port authority, the boards of port authority has been delegated full power with respect to entering into contract, planning and development, fixing of tariff except in national interest, and the aspect of security and emergency arising out of inaction and default. Further, the board of each major port are also entitled to create a specific master plan in respect of any development or infrastructure related projects. Further, provisions regarding CSR norms, that is corporate social responsibility norms, and also development of infrastructure by port authority have been introduced, and also provisions have been made in the bill regarding safeguarding the payment and allowances as well as service conditions, including pension benefits, with respect to the employees of major ports. So, overall, these can be said to be some of the important highlights of the Major Ports Authority Bill 2020. So, this news on Major Port Authorities Bill is an important part of your UPSC syllabus, as in your prelims, this topic gets covered under Economic and Social Development, and in the mains, it gets covered under GS Paper 2 and GS Paper 3. In GS Paper 2, under statutory and regulatory bodies and government policies and interventions for development in various sectors and issues arising out of their design and implementation, and in GS Paper 3, with respect to development of infrastructure, specifically ports. Hence, this news becomes important as an aspect of port has been directly provided in the UPSC syllabus. So, with this understanding, let's move to the next news discussion. Now, let's take up the lead article for discussion appearing on page number 6. This news says that disinformation is a cybersecurity threat. Society needs to be protected from infodemics to prevent the possibility of a breakdown, interruptions, and violence. Now, this particular news highlights about two important aspects. First is disinformation, and second is cybersecurity. Now, basically, what the author highlights is that cybersecurity can be treated as cybersecurity impacts the system or impacts the computer, mobile, online devices, etc. So, number of steps have been taken so far to ensure cybersecurity by government and also by private entities. However, disinformation cannot be cured so easily because disinformation impacts the thinking process of a person and, in a way, numbs or paralyzes cognitive ability. Now, when we talk about cognitive abilities, first of all, let us understand the term cognitive. Now, as per the Cambridge Dictionary, the term cognitive means, or rather is connected with thinking or conscious mental processes. So, we see that this disinformation spread through online or spread through internet impacts thinking of a person, and it also affects or impact the conscious mental processes which is needed to understand any development going around in the society. So basically, disinformation propels a person to think in only a particular direction. So it is here where the author says that tackling disinformation is equally important vis-a-vis tackling cybersecurity. So the government must take regulated steps to tackle the spread of disinformation as it impacts thinking process of a person and also affects the cognitive ability. Now, the author also says that disinformation also creates infodemic. Now, infodemic can be said to be spreading false information in a society in such a way which becomes harmful for the society. Now, such infodemics can lead to violence, riots, can disturb communal harmony, leads to unnecessary protest at times, and can also lead to polarization in the society. And all these aspects of disinformation are also utilized during election process. So this is what this particular article talks about regarding regulating or understanding how to tackle disinformation available on the internet. Now, this topic becomes very important and gets covered under GS Paper 1, GS Paper 2, and GS Paper 3. In GS Paper 1, it gets covered under effects of globalization on Indian society, social empowerment, communalism, regionalism, and secularism, and salient features of Indian society and diversity of India. In GS Paper 2, it gets covered under important aspects of e governance, and in GS Paper 3, this topic gets covered under developments with respect to science and technology. And in the prelims, this topic gets covered under general science, Indian polity and governance, especially with respect to rights issues. So we can say that disinformation refers to an attack and compromises our cognitive being. And it also helps to manipulate the information ecosystem to create social discord, increase polarization in the society, and also influence outcome of an election at times. Now, another term mentioned in the news is cognitive hacking. Now, cognitive hacking refers to a threat from disinformation and computational propaganda. This attack exploits psychological vulnerabilities of a person, perpetuates bias in their thinking process, and eventually compromises logical and critical thinking of various issues surrounding developmental process. And overall, we can say that cognitive hacking gives rise to cognitive dissonance. Another term mentioned is cognitive bias. Now, cognitive bias is a systematic error in thinking due to possession of wrong information affecting the decisions and judgments. So, basically, wrong information will affect the ultimate decision making process of a person. And this aspect is known as cognitive bias. That despite correct information being provided to the person will not think in the direction of the right information or the correct information, and will be forced to think through his prejudices and bias which has been developed due to possession of wrong information. So, this article says that a cognitive hacking in this regard attempts to change target audience thoughts and actions, galvanize societies, and disrupt harmony using disinformation. It exploits cognitive bias and shapes people by perpetuating their prejudices, because the goal is to manipulate the way people perceive reality. So, basically, cognitive hacking changes the perception of reality. An example of cognitive hacking as provided in this article is the storming of US Capitol by right-wing groups on 6th January 2021. So please remember these terms, as you can utilize these terms while writing answers to various questions if at all asked by UPSC. So, overall, the author says that there is a need to tackle disinformation like the government tackles cybersecurity. So, based on this understanding that there is a need to tackle disinformation, the author provides for number of measures. First, the author says that we need a defense in-depth strategy for disinformation, the strategy which is also applicable for cybersecurity. So it says that the defense in depth model identifies disinformation actors and thus removes them from the internet. However, if such disinformation still gets by and is again posted on the net, then they can be detected and then removed. So it says that if disinformation still gets by, detection solutions using humans and artificial intelligence, internal and external fact checking can label or remove such content. The next aspect highlighted is need for smart identity protections and education. Now, here the author says that critical component of cybersecurity is education or awareness of citizens, as this awareness will help them to recognize the vulnerabilities posted online, and overall it will ensure that users do not fall victim to social engineering attempts in creating discords in the society. So, educational awareness is a key tool highlighted by the author. The third point mentioned is to develop mechanisms like information sharing and analysis center. Now, the aspect of information sharing and analytics centers is used in cybersecurity. So, these cyber threats are first of all identified and then removed from the system. Similarly, a mechanisms like ISAC must be put in place to share the identity, content, context, actions, and behavior of actors and disinformation across different social media platforms. It further says that information sharing will help disinformation countermeasures to scale better and respond quickly. So, it also provides for countermeasures to respond to disinformation threats. The next point highlighted in this regard is collaboration of different stakeholders to spread awareness on cybersecurity and disinformation. Here the author says that technology industry, civil society and the government should coordinate to make users aware of cyber threat vectors such as phishing, viruses and malware. And similarly, these stakeholders must also make citizens aware about disinformation. Further, the author highlights about the need for investing in media literacy as well. Here, the author says that the industry with public private partnerships must also invest in media literacy efforts to reach out to the public at large, as intervention with media education can make a big difference in understanding the context, motivations, and challenging disinformations to reduce damage created in the society. So, again, the role of a neutral media becomes very important in a vibrant democracy. Now, moving further, the article highlights about certain international efforts to curb online threat and violence. And these international efforts are basically Paris Call and Christchurch Call. Now, Paris Call for Trust and Security in Cyberspace provides for stability and security in the information space, whereas Christchurch Call to Action aims to eliminate terrorist and violent extremist content online. So, the Christchurch call is a commitment by the governments and tech companies to eliminate terrorist and violent extremist content online. So, regarding online threats and violence, please remember the Paris call for trust and security in cyberspace and Christchurch call to eliminate terrorist and violent extremist content online. So, as a way forward, the author says that the disinformation infodemic requires a concerted and coordinated effort by governments, businesses, non governmental organizations, and other important entities and stakeholders to create standards and implement defense mechanism against disinformation infodemics. Next, the author says that we must take advantage of the frameworks, norms, and tactics that we have already created for cybersecurity to build a safety net against disinformation to tackle the threat which disinformation infodemic poses for the society. In this regard, the author says that we must protect our society against these threats or face the real possibility of a societal breakdown, business interruption, and violence in the streets. Now, any situations of societal breakdown, protest, or even civil war impacts economy of the society. Hence, to keep the economy growing, especially after COVID-19, it is important that the disinformation infodemic does not lead to societal breakdown leading to violence on streets. So overall, the author concludes by saying that society needs to be protected from infodemics to prevent the possibility of a breakdown, interruptions, and violence. As number of technologies, including artificial intelligence and deepfakes, are used or utilized to spread disinformation infodemic in the society. Thus, this article becomes very important from the perspective of GS1, GS2, GS3, and probably even GS4 with respect to ethics. So, with this discussion, let's move to the next article. Now, let's take up the next discussion appearing on page number 7. The article says taking the long view with China, both Asian giants can share prosperity and be independent of each other and of the West. Now, this article highlights that India, especially with respect to China, needs to take a long term approach or a long term vision and should not see China only as an adversary. Now, here with respect to China, India also needs to balance its interest with that of United States of America. So this balancing of interest of India with United States on one hand and with China on the other hand becomes the key highlight of this particular article. So this article says about a changing world order and also of a multipolar world. Now in this multipolar world, the author says that there is also a multipolar Asia, mainly highlighting at the bigger powers in Asia, namely China and India. So it is here where the author says that India must need a clear view in terms of its long term strategy, especially with respect to the changing world order. And this change in the view is also reflective in the way we have started perceiving our borders in the eastern Ladakh, as the term border has not been used. And this sanctity of claims in eastern Ladakh has opened space for settlement. And this is the most pragmatic approach as highlighted by this author. As India and China cannot always see eye to eye on almost every issues, especially the border concerns. Hence, there needs to be certain pragmatic approach and space for settlement of these disputes. Further, the author says that integration of Jammu and Kashmir also provides a strong outfit to India, especially with respect to its international policies. Now, regarding counterbalancing, another country which India needs to counterbalance is Russia. So, again, we see that in this entire changing world order, India enjoys a special position as it maintains a good relation with United States, it maintains a good relation with Russia, and slowly it is also trying to understand to settle its disputes for a long term vision or for a long term strategy to maintain at least a cordial relation with China. Now, the need for geo-balancing becomes important because the United States still sees Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran with suspicion. Now, here India maintains a very good relation with Russia, as with Russia, India has major defense deals, and also with Iran, as India and Iran have historically been good friends. And Chabhar port is strategically very important for India as it is a gateway to Central Asia. Now, considering United States, we have a comprehensive global strategic partnership. Now, despite this fact, India has been cautious even with Quad, where United States is a member. So, as mentioned earlier, India needs a geo-balancing act with China, with United States of America, and also with Russia. So these are the three major countries with which India needs to maintain a counterbalancing act. However, if we see at a larger global perspective, we understand that the global interest of India is more aligned with China vis-a-vis that of the West or even with that of United States of America and Canada. So it is here where the author says that India needs to redefine its engagement with China on the same lines as that of European Union and China, as European Union and China recently concluded the comprehensive investment agreement. Now the European Union has signed an agreement with China despite Joe Biden agreeing to sign a deal with European Union. So it is here where the author says that both India and China can see eye to eye on number of issues, especially with respect to Shanghai Cooperation Organization, especially with respect to challenging the Western global order, as both can be said to be aligned in their interest. Now at UN, India's interest is more congruent with China's interest. And this is also reflective with respect to sharing COVID vaccines, as sharing of COVID vaccines separates India and China from the rest of the world. Now, the author also says that with respect to global governance, both India and China can work as a force multiplier. As Xi Jinping's highlighted about community with shared future for mankind, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi recently highlighted about climate justice, which we just saw, and he also mentioned that how long will India be excluded from the permanent membership of United Nations Security Council. So even in terms of global governance, both India and China have shared interest, especially in challenging the established Western world order. Now, regarding India's balancing of interest with United States, the author says that India, rather than viewing Quad as an alternative or a competitive to BRI, should involve the members of Quad, especially to develop scientific and technological capacity, to develop digital economy, and to focus more on research and innovation, especially in the field of big data, as all these steps will have greater resonance in Asia and Africa. So the author says that India's software development prowess, that is intellect, can shape a post-industrial world, especially with respect to digital technology, data sharing, and this model of development will be very different from that of United States and China. So there is a possibility that India, China, US and even Russia can coexist. And it is here where the doctrine of strategic autonomy becomes important for India. So, the author has concluded this article by saying that, as in the historical past, Asia is big enough for both Asian giants to have a complementary roles, share prosperity, and be independent of each other and of the West. So, this becomes a very important conclusion with respect to India's strategic autonomy and also with respect to balancing geo interest with US, China, and Russia. Now, in your mains examination, this topic becomes important under GS paper 2, especially with respect to India and its neighborhood relations. And in your prelims, this topic gets covered under current events of international importance. With this, let's move to the next article of discussion. The next news to be discussed appears on page number 8. It says furnace oil from titanium factory spills into sea. Cleanup work begins along the coast near Kerala capital. Now this news talks about oil spill. Now oil spill refers to release of a liquid petroleum or hydrocarbon or crude oil into the environment, basically into the sea. Now any kind of oil spill impacts the marine ecosystem, and this oil spill is mainly due to human activity and can be said to be a form of marine and water pollution. So regarding oil spill, you need to know the various ways in which these oil spills can be removed from the sea. So the first is in situ burning. That is, the oil which is spread on the sea is burnt. However, there are certain aspects which needs to be taken care of, especially with respect to atmospheric winds. Other aspect is skimming, that is removing oil from the seawater. Next is using vacuum and centrifuge, where use of vacuum is done to suck out the oil, and with respect to centrifuge, this oil is separated from water. Now the next is chemical dispersion, where various chemicals are used to remove oil spills. And another method is use of bioremediation, that is, use of microorganisms, mainly bacteria, fungus, algae, to remove these oil spills. Now, the topic of oil spill has been provided in detail in your PDF, so you can go through the PDF, especially from your prelims perspective. And this topic of oil spill becomes important from the perspective of general science and also environment and ecology from your prelims examination perspective. So, with this, let's move to the question for the day. So, based on our discussion, this becomes your question for the day. Question is Paris call and Christchurch call can be associated with. Options are A. Climate change and marine pollution, B. Regulating COVID related travel, C. Cyberspace security and use of violent threats, and D. New study on quantum gravity. Now, coming to the answer of yesterday, the answer is C, that is both 1 and 2. So, the question was with reference to the new variety of marigold developed in India, consider the following statements. First, it has been developed by Indian Institute of Horticultural Research in Bangalore. Second, it has carotene content of 2.8%. So the question is which of the statements given above is are correct. So here the correct answer is both 1 and 2, that is C. So with this we come to an end to today's discussion. Thank you.